He stepped onto the AGT stage with a kind of quietness that didn't come from shyness, but from deep respect. Respect for the moment, for the lights, for the thousands of eyes waiting to see what he would become under them. His footsteps were soft, almost hesitant, as if each one carried a memory. The stage floor reflected faint glimmers of gold from the overhead lights, and those reflections danced around his shoes as he walked. He wasn't dressed like someone trying to impress, no glitter, no oversized belt buckles, nothing shouting for attention. Just a simple black jacket, neatly pressed but worn enough to show that he had lived life more than he had ever shown it. A small silver pendant hung around his neck, old, scratched, but precious. He touched it briefly as he reached the center of the stage. The crowd murmured softly. You could almost hear the question floating through the room. Is he another Elvis impersonator? They had seen many. Some good, some amusing, some forgettable. But when this Filipino singer exhaled, there was a weight to it, something heavier than nerves. The judges noticed immediately. Simon leaned forward in his chair the way he always did when something didn't feel ordinary. His brows lowered, eyes narrowing slightly, trying to understand what he was sensing. Sophia smiled warmly, expecting charm and entertainment. Heidi folded her hands under her chin, already softened by the singer's gentle presence. And Howie tilted his head, curious in his own quiet way. The Filipino singer stood there, hands at his sides, but his shoulders carried invisible stories. From backstage, Terry Crews watched him with a kind of instinctive admiration, the kind he only gave to people who walked onstage with more heart than confidence. There was something sincere about this man, something real. He lifted his eyes toward the audience, just a quick glance, and in that split second his entire expression changed. His gaze softened like he was remembering someone. The lights were bright, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he breathed deeply, grounding himself in the moment. His fingers brushed the microphone stand, steadying it slightly. The mic itself was cold, metallic, and intimidating, but he held it with gentle hands, as if he wasn't holding a tool but an offering. Before a single word was spoken, the entire room began to settle into silence. It wasn't the forced, polite silence of a waiting crowd. It was the silence that comes when people sense something meaningful is about to happen. It comes from instinct. Human instinct to feel before understanding. In that moment, the singer wasn't just a contestant. He looked like a man carrying a memory he wasn't sure he was ready to share. His posture straightened only slightly, barely noticeable, but enough to show the judges that he had finally made the decision. He was going to sing from a place he had kept guarded for years. He blinked slowly, just once, and behind that one blink was grief, love, longing, and a whole childhood tied to Elvis songs his father used to hum. But the audience didn't know that yet. All they saw was a man with a soft presence, a man who seemed like the type to speak gently even when life was loud around him. The stage lights warmed his face, highlighting the faint nervousness around his eyes. Yet his jaw was steady, not tense but determined. He wasn't trying to imitate anyone. He wasn't trying to check boxes or impress with theatrics. Instead, he stood there like someone who had found the courage to return to a memory he had avoided for years. Simon shifted again, still studying him. Something about the singer reminded him of auditions long past. Auditions where people walked onstage not to win but to heal. And those were the auditions Simon secretly valued the most. The singer adjusted the microphone height by a few inches. He didn't do it casually. He did it with a kind of gratitude in his movements, like he saw the mic as a bridge between his heart and the world. When he looked back at the judges, his expression wasn't bold or proud. It was honest. The kind of honesty that makes people believe before they hear. The theater felt smaller now, the way it always feels when a performer carries something personal. Even the buzzing energy of the audience softened into anticipation. His chest rose slowly as he inhaled again. This time the breath was steadier, calmer, like someone ready to speak to a ghost. But he didn't speak yet. He simply stood there, quiet and still, a Filipino singer on the biggest talent stage in the world, preparing to sing not for fame, but for someone he loved and lost. And before he even opened his mouth, the room already knew. This was not going to be a normal audition. Unfolds in a way that doesn't just shift the energy of the room, it reshapes it. The judges had been smiling politely after hearing his name, waiting for the usual introduction they heard 100 times a season. But instead of a fun fact or a predictable joke, the Filipino singer took a single breath, deep enough to steady the tremble in his voice, and let a truth slip out that instantly silenced the entire auditorium. "My father used to sing Elvis songs to me," he said, his voice gentle, almost fragile. "He passed away last year and this was his favorite." Those few words hit harder than any dramatic story could. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was raw honesty, simple, human, and heartbreakingly sincere. The moment he said it, something shifted. The stage lights suddenly felt softer, warmer, as if the room itself understood the weight of what he was carrying. Simon, who had been leaning on his hand casually, slowly straightened up. His eyes narrowed, not out of judgment but focus, interest, recognition. He knew this wasn't just another tribute act. This was a son honoring a man he loved, the man who shaped his voice, his childhood, his dreams. The audience felt it too. People who had been chatting quietly or scrolling through their phones now froze, eyes lifted toward the stage. There was a subtle hush, the type that happens when everyone realizes something meaningful is about to happen. The singer's hands tightened around the microphone. His fingers trembled. But he didn't look nervous. He looked emotional, like he was standing on the edge of a memory he wasn't sure he could step into without breaking. He continued speaking, though softly, as if the words were meant for one person only. He talked about how his father would play Elvis vinyls every Sunday morning while cooking breakfast, singing along in a voice that wasn't perfect but was full of love. He described being a little boy sitting on the floor, listening to his father sing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," and how he used to mimic him, his posture, his tone, even the tiny pauses between the lyrics. His voice cracked slightly when he said, "Hey always told me one day, you'll sing this on a big stage, bigger than anything I ever stepped on." The judges listened in absolute stillness. Heidi tilted her head, her expression melting into something soft and maternal. Sophia rested her hand lightly over her heart, visibly touched. Even Howie, usually quick to insert humor or lighten a moment, sat quietly, his expression thoughtful. They weren't judging anymore, they were witnessing something deeply personal, a young man carrying grief into a dream his father had dreamed with him. Then came a moment so quiet it felt like the world stopped breathing. The singer lifted his eyes to the ceiling, blinking rapidly as if holding back tears. "I just hope," he whispered, "that wherever he is he hears me today." His voice didn't break, it dissolved into silence, but a silence filled with meaning. One camera zoomed in close enough to catch the wet shimmer forming at the corner of his eye. Another captured a woman in the audience already wiping her cheeks, moved not just by the tragedy of loss but by the beauty of a love that still echoed through him. Terry Crews backstage watched with a hand on his chest, whispering something to a crew member. "This is going to be special." In that moment, the singer wasn't just a contestant. He was a son singing through grief, standing on the stage his father dreamed of. And every person in that room felt the weight of that love. Love that didn't fade, love that didn't break, love that now lived inside one voice about to sing a song that was more than lyrics. It was memory, it was goodbye, it was a promise kept. By the time he stepped back to prepare for his first note, the room wasn't waiting for a performance anymore. They were waiting for a moment. One that already felt like it would stay with them long after the stage lights dimmed. The stage felt impossibly large the moment he closed his eyes. The lights dimmed just slightly, just enough to make the entire room lean in, waiting. It was the kind of silence that didn't belong in a theater full of thousands, so complete, so delicate, that even a single breath felt too loud. And in the center of it stood the Filipino singer, holding every emotion he had tried so hard to hold back for years. His fingers trembled near the microphone stand. He inhaled once, deep and steady, as if that breath contained the entire memory of his father. When he opened his mouth, the first note didn't just come out, it escaped, fragile and trembling, like something too precious to hold. It wasn't powerful. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to speak. And in that small, vulnerable sound, something shifted in the room. People leaned forward without even realizing it. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh wow," but even that voice faded quickly, swallowed by the moment. The judges reacted instantly. Simon's eyebrows lifted. Not because he was shocked but because he recognized something rare, authenticity. This wasn't a performance. This was a memory, resurrected in song. Heidi's lips parted gently, her expression softening as if she had just witnessed someone open an old diary in front of the world. Sophia pressed her hands together, drawn in by the rawness of his voice. And Howie sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the singer, sensing the emotional weight behind every trembling syllable. As the verse continued, his voice quivered but not with fear, more like a heart that had been cracked open and was finally allowed to breathe. There was no attempt to mimic Elvis. No attempt to act. Every word carried a lifetime of listening to his father singing in their small living room back in the Philippines. Nights when the electricity would go out and his father would light a candle, pick up his old guitar, and sing the same song he was now singing on the biggest stage in the world. Those nights weren't glamorous, but they were beautiful. Moments of warmth and safety he could never get back. And the audience felt it. You could see couples reach for each other's hands. A young girl in the third row held her mother's sleeve, eyes watering even though she didn't know why. Emotion doesn't need explanation, it only needs truth, and the truth in his voice was undeniable. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing the faint shine in his eyes as he held a long note that almost broke mid-air. But instead of collapsing, the note wavered, just enough to remind everyone that behind this voice was a son still grieving. Tears didn't fall, but they lived in every breath he took. Simon leaned back slightly, then forward again as if the performance had pulled him closer without permission. He wasn't judging anymore, he was remembering. Everyone in the room seemed to be remembering someone. A father, a mother, a friend they wished they could hear sing one more time. Then came the transition into the chorus, and with it, something changed. His voice grew stronger, not loud but steadier, richer, as if he had finally connected with something deep inside himself. It was no longer just a tribute, it was a release. The emotion wasn't trapped anymore. It flowed freely, threading through every lyric, filling the theater with the kind of sincerity that could not be faked. A woman in the front row reached up, wiping her cheek. A man behind her cleared his throat, pretending he wasn't crying. Terry Crews, watching from backstage, whispered something under his breath, eyes wide with admiration. Even the technicians near the cameras were motionless, forgetting their cues for a few seconds as they listened. And the singer, he didn't look at the audience, didn't look at the judges. He kept his eyes closed, holding onto the image of his father the way a child clings to a final hug. Each line he sang felt like another step closer to healing, another piece of pain set free into the world. By the time he reached the end of the chorus, the entire theater was suspended in emotion. No one moved, no one breathed too loudly. The first note might have been soft, but now his voice carried the weight of love, loss, and memory so powerful it felt like a prayer. And in that breathtaking silence between notes, the whole room knew this performance wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to be felt, and they felt it deeply, undeniably, and all at once. As the Filipino singer moved deeper into the heart of the Elvis classic, something began to shift in the room. Slowly at first, like a quiet wave spreading from the stage to the farthest seats of the theater. The soft amber lights overhead made the entire moment feel almost sacred, as if the stage itself understood the weight of the song he was singing. Each lyric rolled out of him with the kind of tenderness that doesn't come from practice or talent alone, but from memory, real, raw memory. And the more he sang, the more the audience felt they were witnessing a man not just performing, but remembering. When he reached the first swell of the chorus, his voice grew richer, fuller, edged with a kind of trembling sincerity that made people stop breathing for a second. You could hear small gasps in the crowd, a few quiet sniffles, and the unmistakable sound of someone wiping their tears with their sleeve. The camera panned across the audience, capturing faces that were no longer watching a show, they were caught inside his story. Even the people who'd come expecting another upbeat AGT performance suddenly felt their hearts pulled into something far deeper. On the judging panel, the reactions were even more intense. Sophia was the first to visibly break, her eyes glimmered under the stage lights as she blinked back tears that were already forming. She pressed her fingers gently beneath her lower eyelids, trying to stop them from falling, but the emotion was too strong. Heidi's reaction was softer. She placed her hand over her heart, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Howie leaned forward, his brows furrowed with a mix of surprise and admiration, trying to understand how such a gentle, quiet man could release such powerful emotion into a single song. But the focus shifted quickly to Simon, the man known for his tough exterior, sharp critiques, and almost impossible to please standards was sitting completely still. His elbows rested lightly on the desk, his eyes locked on the singer as though he was hearing something he hadn't expected, something he didn't know he needed. There was no smirk, no raised eyebrow, no impatient shift of his posture. Instead, his expression softened in a way the audience rarely saw. His eyes glistened with a shine that only appeared when something hit him somewhere he couldn't hide. And this performance, this voice filled with pain and love, was hitting him harder with every note. The audience could sense the emotional shift in Simon. People around the theater whispered, nudged each other, even pointed discreetly, shocked at the sight of one of the toughest judges trying to hold back tears. It was as if the singer's voice was dissolving every wall in the room, every defense, every expectation. The atmosphere had turned from a performance into a shared emotional moment that connected everyone in the building. The singer himself seemed unaware of the effect he was having. His eyes remained gently closed through most of the song, as if he was singing not to the judges, not to the crowd, but to a memory only he could see. Every rise and fall in his voice carried the weight of the father he lost. every soft vibrato echoing the countless times they must have listened to Elvis together. It didn't feel like he was trying to impress anyone. He wasn't casing a golden buzzer, he wasn't trying to showcase vocal tricks. He was just remembering, and that purity, that honesty, was what made the entire room fall apart. Midway through the crescendo, a woman in the front row started crying openly, her shoulders shaking as she wiped her cheeks. A man beside her rested his hand comfortingly on her back. Onstage, Sophia finally let a tear fall, unable to control the emotion washing over her. Heidi bit her lip, shaking her head gently as if in disbelief at how deeply the performance was touching her. Backstage, even crew members paused to watch the monitors, sound engineers, camera operators, people who had seen thousands of auditions, standing in silence, moved by the kind of voice that comes only once in a very long time. Every note felt like a message sent upward, every lyric like a thread connecting the present moment to a past filled with love. The room wasn't just listening, they were grieving with him, healing with him, feeling with him. The air itself felt thicker, heavier with significance. The song had become a vessel, and everyone was inside it, being carried by the sincerity of one man's heart. By the time he neared the final lines, almost the entire theater had watery eyes, and as he held the last long, trembling note, letting it float, letting it breathe, the emotion in the room reached its peak. The audience seemed frozen, terrified to interrupt such a fragile, beautiful moment. It wasn't just a song anymore, it was a connection, pure, emotional, unforgettable. Scene 5 begins in a silence so deep, it almost feels sacred. When the Filipino singer releases the final trembling note of the Elvis classic, it hangs in the air like a fragile piece of glass, delicate, brilliant, unbroken. No one dares to move. Not the audience, not the judges, not even the camera operators who are usually quick to adjust their shots. For 2 full seconds the entire AGT auditorium becomes a still photograph, frozen in raw emotion. The singer stands there with his hands loosely clasped in front of him, head slightly bowed, chest rising and falling as he tries to steady his breath. In that moment he is not performing, he is remembering. Honoring, feeling. Then it happens. A sound like a wave hitting the shore, chairs scraping back, hands coming together, voices erupting into cheers. The stillness breaks, the entire auditorium rises to its feet in a unanimous standing ovation. It's not the loud, explosive kind that comes after a big high note. This one grows slowly, gracefully, almost reverently, as if everyone is trying to applaud without shattering the emotion he just created. People in the audience have tears streaking down their cheeks. A man in the back wipes his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket. A teenage girl hugs her mother. Even some of the toughest-looking individuals, the ones who came for entertainment, now look like the performance touched a place in them they didn't expect. The Filipino singer lifts his head slightly, and the moment he sees the standing ovation, his lips part in disbelief. His eyes shine with tears he can no longer hide. He looks upward for a brief second, whispering something no microphone catches, but everyone can guess. A thank you, a message, a prayer, a dedication to the father he lost, the one whose favorite Elvis song he just breathed back to life on one of the biggest stages in the world. Sofia Vergara is the first judge to speak. She wipes under her eyes and shakes her head as if trying to steady her own emotions. You didn't just sing, she says, voice soft but filled with awe. You gave us your heart. Every word felt like a message to someone you loved. I felt it, we all felt it. Her words land gently, like a hand placed on the singer's shoulder from across the stage. Heidi Klum follows, leaning forward with both hands pressed to her chest. That was, she says with a breathy pause, the most emotional performance we've had this season, maybe in the entire show. You made the whole room feel something real, something special. She smiles warmly, tears still gathered in the corners of her eyes. Howie Mandel nods slowly, visibly moved. You reminded us why music matters, he says. It's not just sound, it's connection. And tonight you connected with every single person in this room. The crowd cheers louder, agreeing wholeheartedly. Then all eyes turn to Simon Cowell. He's not leaning back in his chair, he's not smirking, he's not acting like the critic people expect him to be. Instead, Simon is sitting completely still, elbows on the table, hands clasped as he looks at the singer with a softness rarely seen on his face. When he finally speaks, his voice is lower than usual, as if he doesn't want to break the emotion in the air. I've heard countless Elvis covers. He begins, pausing for a long moment, but this was the first time I felt one. His voice nearly cracks. You didn't imitate him, you interpreted him, you honored him. And you honored your father. Simon slowly stands up from his seat. The crowd gasps as they realize what is about to happen. He looks at the singer, nods once, firmly, and then reaches forward with a kind of certainty that feels like destiny. His hand slams the golden buzzer. The moment the button is pressed, the entire theater explodes into golden light. Confetti bursts from above, shimmering like tiny stars raining down on the stage. The Filipino singer covers his mouth with both hands, overwhelmed, sinking slightly to his knees as the reality crashes into him. This isn't just applause. This isn't just appreciation. This is life-changing. This is the dream his father once sang into his heart becoming real right before his eyes. Terry Crews rushes from backstage, embracing him tightly as gold continues to fall. The judges stand applauding, some still drying their tears. The crowd chants his name, filling the room with the kind of love and energy that only happens when a performance becomes a memory the world will never forget. And through the confetti, through the cheers, through the overwhelming emotion, the singer looks upward again. Eyes closed, tears streaming, whispering the same words he said before, this time loud enough for the world to feel. "Dad, this was for you."